All right. Okay, great. The participant number went up, so that means we can start. Welcome, everybody. You are at the Titan Table Talk. Good afternoon, or I should say good morning. It's not quite 12 o'clock yet. Thank you for being with us today. We are back for another installment of the Titan Table Talks. My name is Philip Vasquez. I haven't met many of you, but I'm new to campus and moderating today's panel. Cecil Cheek has been doing it in the past, and we're going to start doing this program together. And since she's away today, I am going to get started for us. And this is my first one, so bear with me. I'm really excited to be here. Like I said, my name is Philip. I use he, him, and his pronouns, and I'm the new director of diversity, inclusion, and equity programs here at Cal State Fullerton. I'm going to serve as your moderator for today's talk. And we should first say that this dialogue is being brought to you by Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Programs in partnership with the Office of the President, Alumni Engagement, and Government External Relations. Titan Table Talks is a monthly dialogue event in which panelists are invited to speak on their personal experiences as it relates to the selected theme. This event will help educate participants on the impact of various social justice issues on certain cultural identities to promote racial equity on campus at Cal State Fullerton. Before we start, I know that a lot of us have gotten used to being in webinars and Zoom rooms, but I want to go over a couple logistical details for our program today to ensure that you're able to engage in this dialogue with our panelists. The first is that this event is being broadcasted on a Zoom webinar. So your cameras and microphones will be off during this time. If you would like to engage with our panel or team behind the scenes, please use the Q&A function in the menu bar below. We have staff members who are able to monitor that during the panel and address any needs, whether it be technical, or we encourage everybody to submit questions during the panel and during the remarks, so that at the end of the panel today, we'll be able to do a Q&A session. You can submit those questions at any time. We also want to tell you that this event is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Diversity, Inclusion, and Equity Programs YouTube channel with closed captioning available. And at the very end of our dialogue, you'll receive a feedback link to help us improve this program, as well as provide ideas for future events. Today, our panelists will be engaging in a dialogue about empowerment in Native and Indigenous communities. But before we get to that, it's my pleasure to introduce Cal State Fullerton's President, Fran Verjee, who is here to give opening remarks. President Verjee, thank you for joining us. I'll turn it over to you.
Well, Philip, thanks so much. Welcome to the Titan family, and thanks for stepping in for Cecil today. Good morning, everyone, or almost afternoon. Welcome to our Titan Table Talks, Empowering Native American and Indigenous Communities. The theme of this year's Table Talks series, it speaks directly to the panelists' personal experiences with overcoming systemic barriers and their personal stories of perseverance. It's our hope that by speaking from a lens of empowerment, our campus community will learn what kind of barriers marginalized communities face and the progression from marginalization to success. As an institution, we can move from a place of acknowledgement of these barriers to action through allyship, through solidarity, and through careful listening and then action. I want to begin by thanking our moderator, of course, and also thanking our offices of Government and Community Relations and Alumni Relations for their partnership. And then there's our amazing panelists today. We start with Virginia Carmelo, who received her BA in Ethnic Studies from Cal State Fullerton, of course. Welcome, Virginia. Virginia's paternal side is California Native American. Gabrielino and Tongva and Chumash tribes. From 2001 to 2012, Virginia served as a tribal council member of the Gabrielino Tongva Nation, the tribe indigenous to the entire Los Angeles basin. From 2005 to 2010, she served as the tribal chairperson, and she is currently a consultant and a cultural educator, and dedicating her time to activism and indigenous dance. Stephen Villa is a indigenous cultural conservationist descending from the Chumash and the Chumash tribes. Stephen's vast experience in cultural resources spans 20 years, with extensive training from field studies to formal classroom instruction. As a member of the Gabrielino and Chumash Tribal Council, Stephen is responsible for preserving the Chumash culture and language, and as CEO and Chief Monitor of Natives Detecting Natives Ancestors. Stephen conducts cultural resource investigations, monitors field sites, and provides a variety of services, including but not limited to archaeological and biological, marine, environmental assessments, and arborist declarations. And finally, we have Reina, who is a Zapotec Oaxacan graphic art designer based in Orange County, California. She graduated from Cal State Fullerton, go Titans, with a Bachelor's of Fine Arts in Graphic and Interactive Design. During her time as a student, Reina was active as an e-board member of the Intertribal Student Council, and Reina's artwork is inspired by her upbringing in Oaxaca, and she strives to depict an accurate representation of her people and her culture. As many of you know, before our campus decided to read The Book of Unknown Americans, which was our first inaugural common read 2 years ago, the novel There by Tommy Orange was a very worthy finalist for our choices. And so I had a chance to read that book. And looking back now, more than 3 years after reading it, I can say its impact has been lasting and profound, probably as lasting as profound as anything I've read in the past decade. Last year at this event, I quoted what has become one of my favorite passages from that book. And I want to share that quote again this year, albeit through a little bit different lens. The quote is, "If you were fortunate enough to be born into a family whose ancestors directly benefited from the genocide, maybe you think that the more you don't know, the more innocent you can stay," which is a good incentive not to find out, not to look deep, to walk carefully around the sleeping tiger. At Cal State Fullerton, it's not enough to carefully walk around that sleeping tiger. To walk slowly and carefully is to allow America's history books to continue to portray the decimation of the native tribes as an accidental consequence of Western settlement rather than government-sponsored killing campaigns that it really was. To deny America's role in perpetuating one of, frankly, the deadliest genocides in human history. We have to face our past, acknowledge our sins as a nation in order to ensure a better future for all of us, for not just for our Indigenous population, for our entire country. For Native people, the pain and anguish of the sleeping tiger that we're talking about, it transcends the lack of recognition of the genocide of their ancestors. And for people who are outside of Native and Indigenous communities, the sleeping tiger allows us to benefit and to believe that what we possess today has more to do with our own hard work and intelligence than an abundance of unearned privilege that has come at the expense of our Native and Indigenous peoples. Or to believe that institutions we attend or employers that we work for are not somehow connected to this genocide as our joint history. I'll give you a case in point. Just last year, I shared that my law school alma mater, UC Hastings, whose prominent alumni include Vice President Kamala Harris, was named after a man who perpetuated this exact Indigenous genocide. He masterminded the deadliest of the many California militia campaigns designed to wipe out Native Californians in the Round and Eden Valleys in Northern California. He actually helped finance the killing of at least 283 Native men, women, and children to take the land upon which my alma mater not only sits, but celebrates the name Hastings on everything from buildings to letterhead. As tragic as this is, it's not anomalous in our nation or our state or even our region. It is actually who we are. But for too long, we have not listened to the truth. We have not bothered to recognize our history or make reparations to address it. In Hastings' case, the Round Valley massacres he orchestrated, they're not taught in California schools to this day. I can tell you that in my time at the institution, it was never mentioned. To once again, to borrow from Tommy Orange's There, all these stories that we have not been telling all this time, that we would not have been listening to, they're part of what we need to heal. So what does sharing these stories to stimulate healing look like? At UC Hastings, there are several measures that the institution has undertaken to manifest restorative justice. The allocation of space for a memorial in the main lobby of its administrative building. The creation of a program that provides members of the tribes in the Round Valley pro bono legal help. The founding of a program to focus on Indigenous law. And last year, the Law School Board of Directors voted to authorize UC Hastings leadership to work with state legislatures and other stakeholders to actually change the college's name. And finally, in September of this year, Governor Newsom actually approved, he signed the name change from UC Hastings to UC College of the Law, San Francisco. But what does this look like for us at Cal State Fullerton? Well, no, we're not named after someone who sanctioned the killing of Native Californians, but our responsibility to both share those stories that can lead to healing and eradicate inequities for Native Indigenous communities is still no less pressing. And so we are striving to live up to that responsibility in our efforts to awaken that sleeping tiger, to actually awaken it, to being more intentional and consistent in our acknowledgement and honoring that we are actually occupants of the land that belong to the Tongva and the Hachiman peoples. By recognizing that our history has led us to this present point, a time in which Native and Indigenous communities continue to suffer myriad inequities that were exacerbated by the pandemic. And by ensuring that our students understand our true history, that the United States, it actually ranks among the most egregious perpetrators of genocide in human history. And while the shameful past cannot be erased, we as Titans, we can be a catalyst to bringing a long overdue awareness of our history and to move toward healing. Not just 1 month out of the year with words, but every single day with intentional actions, such as the creation of our new pipelines with tribal community colleges, the establishing of the Cal State Fullerton Native and Indigenous Student Success Advisory Group, and the recent appointment of a Cal NAGPRA coordinator who will ensure that the appropriate handling and returning of any artifacts found at Cal State Fullerton to their rightful place with Indigenous tribes. And with events like this that highlight the voices of our Native American and Indigenous communities to better understand and appreciate the incredible, incredible gifts of leadership, empowerment, and resilience that they bring to our classrooms and our communities. So I want to thank you again for joining us today and for your commitment to this journey that we are on together. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd love to turn it back to Phil and go back and our panelists.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much, President Virgie, for being here. And it's even more exciting, I think, that we recognize, and in your remarks, especially just the idea that there is a space here at in our community and in our university for us to acknowledge history, but also provide space for us to learn from people who are going to share about their empowerment that they get from connection to their community and their Indigenous history. So it's really exciting for me to begin this panel. I'm really happy that President Virgie introduced our panelists already. So just to kind of reintroduce them by name, we have Stephen Villa here today, we have Reina Perez, and then we have Virginia Carmelo. What we'll do is get started, and I believe that each of our panelists I think that what they're going to do is they're going to each answer questions, and I will go ahead and say that since I haven't done one of these before, I'll go ahead and leave it open to whoever wants to jump in when I ask a question. We don't have to go in any particular order of panelists, and then we can begin the conversation that way. And so I want to just remind one more thing for those of you who are in our audience today. Please feel free to ask questions and type questions into the Q&A feature of the Zoom room, so that our staff here in the Zoom room can keep track of those questions. And then at the end of the session today, we'll go ahead and be able to have time for Q&A with our panelists. So having said that, like we have mentioned today, the topic of today is empowerment, and particularly empowering Native and Indigenous communities. And so given that everybody's journey is unique and shaped by their own life experiences, we are exploring the meaning of empowerment in the lives of our community members with Table Talks. And so to start off today, I want to ask each of you to open up with what your own story has taught you about the word empowerment or the concept of empowerment, and what empowerment means to you in your life today, and how you have come to understand that in your own life. Does anybody want to volunteer to go first? Start us off.
Sure.
Right.
Love to start. Haku. Wumi apitnech kich ich antik kikich. Kashoyeti iet lali shao. Kakti Stephen Villa. I'm glad to be here. My greeting was in my native language of Barbarania Chumash, or which we call Smooich, and I just had said hello, how's everybody doing? And it's good to be here today. I really gave a thought about the word empowerment, more about that, and what does that mean? Now, I'm going to do, from my point of view, as a panelist, it's from my own experience, and it may not line up with the other panelists because this is my own individual experience that I've had and what we've gone. Everybody goes through their own individual, whether it's tribally or where you grew up or your parents, it has a lot to do with it. So that's, I just wanted to make that clear that this is from my personal point of view, and not to take away from anybody else. Empowerment. What is your definition of empowerment? That's the whole thing. It means a lot of things, but for me, what I took out of it was respected and confident in their communities. How do we get respected and confident in our communities, and how can we feel that to push forward for the future? That's kind of like enabling individuals to constructively manage our lives within our native culture, and understanding our values, ethics, and principles of our native cultures. Having that as a basis is, to me, I guess, would give empowerment, even though that's a colonial word. So I'm going to step into that for a second, because the colonial word of empowerment is individual, and we think of the goodness of the many, not the goodness of the one. So our empowerment empowers all of us. One of us steps up, we all step up. One of your students that's Indigenous graduate, we all graduate. That's how I feel. I just wanted to, I ran across something that that made sense, and it's what is colonization and settler colonialism? Do I have a second? Do you mind if I have a second to take that on? Okay. I pulled this up because I work with the 7th generation with my tribe of 7th Generation Foundation from Arcata, California, for Indigenous development. Colonization is the act of invaders taking over people, land, and resources by force. In Canada, United States, and many other places, settlers colonialism followed, where the invader stays. It is accomplished by the violent removal on large scale of people from the historic homelands and a genocidal destruction of Indigenous political institutions, economic systems, social structures, spiritual beliefs, languages, and cultures. Settler colonialism is not a historic event, but an ongoing structure. Settler states continue to hold Indigenous land and resources in trust with little regard for self-determination of the people. And ongoing colonization means that settlers dictate how the land and resources are used, what will be provided in education, security, and subsequence, and how it will be distributed. They dictate the nature of participation in the economy and politics. These controls are intended to keep Indigenous people divided, dependent, and oppressed. Okay, so I know that's a little heavy, but thank you, Virginia. You got all that. And I know how you feel about that, because we're on the same page all the time with everything we do. If I get a thumbs up, Virginia, I'm okay. So that's where I wanted to start out. What is empowerment? That I want to challenge the viewers on the Zoom and the students. What is empowerment to you? We can start at many places, but I think it's learning who we are, learning where you're from, listening to your elders, not trying to fast track like everybody in the youth is trying to do right now. They want to fast track everything forward quickly. And we understand that. So we have to come as elder people, because I'm 60, we have to think about, how are we going to handle this? How do we empower our youth? Okay, so that's something that's on, I kind of make left and right turns here, so please bear with me. For empowerment for myself, if I have to use that word, it took a long time. It took about 40 years to take it slow, to listen, to learn, to gain knowledge, to get the education, and to learn how to walk in both worlds. Because they say it's impossible to walk in both worlds, but all of us here are doing it because we're sitting here right now. So we're walking in both worlds. And that's the challenge for having empowerment, is to be able to walk in both worlds and to be able to succeed. That's my opinion.
Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Raina, would you like to go next?
I'll let Virginia go first.
Sure.
I'd like my elders to go first.
Okay, no problem. Go ahead, Virginia.
Thank you so much. And Miyiha Wenihikan, good to be here. Greetings to all of you. Empowerment is a big word. And for me, I think it's been like a full circle. When I was at Cal State Fullerton, it was a very, tumultuous time. The social movements of the 60s were happening. And I think identity at that time was something that a lot of us were taking on, and recognizing the injustices that had occurred historically to many different people, not just Native Americans, but all of our different people of color. So at that time, it was more of I would say an anger towards the injustices. But going on through the years, and where my path has taken me in terms of empowerment is really relying on the connection to who we are as Native people and our connection to this land. And, Native people are from all over, not just, America, everywhere. And, people are native to their own land, so they have connections to their own land. So my journey with empowerment has really been taken on new levels as I continue to work in the community, and just strengthening my other community members, because we have a lot of still to this day, a lot of issues, and families are where they are, and it's up to each and every one of us to help lift them up and beyond. So one of the things that I do encourage young people is to go ahead and get their education. I was the first one in my family to ever have even enter a college, let alone get to the degree part. And it was a struggle. It was a great struggle, because it wasn't the most important thing on my plate at the time. It was something I wanted to do, but there were other things happening, of course, with the family and the community that were just as important, equally important. So, in terms of where it led me in my journey is to just really become more firm, I think, in the basis of who I am as a person in my community, not just me individually. Like Steve says, we do always think in terms of our community. And I think some of that has been also to take on those core values that we as Indigenous people have, in terms of recognizing our land base, recognizing our community, acknowledging our elders, paying respect, in many different ways, whatever part of the community that you happen to be in, if you're younger or older, and also maintaining and creating and participating in the integration of the community, because our communities have suffered intense destruction, displacement, just all these horrible things. So for us to even be together at a time in history now is pretty much a miracle. Within our own tribe, 90% of us perished in a small time period of just around 70 years. So getting past even processing something like this as a young person, and then coming to terms with it, and then where do we fit in our bigger society? We do have to walk in two worlds, and this is one of the things that I had to teach my children, and that was probably one of my foremost projects, I guess, during my lifetime, is to make sure that I, brought my children up with the upbringing that they knew who they were as Indigenous people of this land. And I think that one of the greatest compliments I've ever received, and was just very recently, my children are all in their 40s now, where one of my longtime friends from another tribe, he just kind of said to me, "You did a good job." And, to me, that means that, we have more community members that are going to be carrying on everything that we as Indigenous people are about, which, includes all of our traditions and all of those things that we still fight for on this land. So yeah, that's pretty much where my journey has taken me.
Yes, thank you, Virginia. Thank you very much. All right, Reina, the floor is yours.
Sakujiyarata, Narala Rey. Good morning, everybody. My name is Reina. I said that in my native language, Zapoteco. And thank you to Stephen and Virginia for those wonderful words that I just heard. I feel like I'm already learning, and it's only been like 10 minutes. So empowerment, that was it kind of feels like kind of a generic question, but when I looked into it, it's, I think it feels more of a journey for me in learning who I was, because I always knew who I was, but I wasn't necessarily aware of how different that might have been. So growing up, a question I got a lot was, especially now that a lot of younger people want to learn about their ancestry and who they are, I get asked a lot, how do you know you were Indigenous? And that question used to stop me a lot, because I'd be like, well, how do you find out about something that you thought was normal? So it's not like there was this one day where my parents were like, oh, like you're Zapotec and we speak Zapoteco, and these are people. No, it's just kind of like I grew up hearing a different language other than Spanish and English. So when people ask me that still, I'm like, well, I guess I always knew that I was Indigenous, but I wasn't aware of it because I thought it was normal. So when I was younger, I went to school in Santa Ana. And when I would have my friends over, my parents would talk to our family members in Oaxaca, and they'd be speaking in Zapoteco. And my friends would be like, what are your parents speaking? And me and my older sister would be like, they're speaking Italian or they're speaking French. Like we would make kind of like tease our friends, because they obviously knew they weren't speaking Italian and French, but we would have fun with that. And then we'd be like, oh, like, well, they're speaking Zapoteco. And I guess that's where the innocence of being a child an Indigenous child comes from, because when my friends would ask me, hey, what language is that? I would answer and leave it at that. I wouldn't ask, hey, do your parents speak a native language? Because in my head, well, it's normal. Why would I ask something that they probably speak also? So that was my first encounter to my awareness of being Indigenous as like a 6-7-year-old. Like, oh, like they keep asking me, like, what language is that? Well, that's when I'm like, oh, okay, well, we obviously speak a different language than most of my friends. So empowerment for me came through my identity. And it took a very long time to get here. I didn't always like being Zapotec. I wished for a long time that my parents spoke English. I wished for a long time that my parents spoke perfect Spanish. But luckily now at my 30 years of age, I'm very happy to be who I am. I'm very grateful to have grown up in my community in Oaxaca, hearing Zapoteco every day, being able to speak to my grandparents and my elders in their language, in my language, and them not having to feel bad because they don't understand Spanish. So empowerment for me is being secure in who I am now, and helping my peers who are also from my community feel that same pride. And especially in a time like now where a lot of people think that being racist towards Indigenous people is a thing of the past. As we all saw literally like 3 weeks ago, Nuri Martinez made those racist remarks against Oaxaqueños and Indigenous communities from Oaxaca. And when people say like, check your parents, check your grandparents for the racist remarks, it's more like check yourselves, because a lot of y'all are still doing these little jokes, these little racist references that are obviously not okay. So empowerment for me definitely comes from a place of being happy to be who I am.
Thank you, Reina. Thank you, all three of you. I couldn't help but make a couple notes here to kind of, since we're getting this started, you know, I'm looking down at the questions that we prepared, and I'm thinking of how much Stephen's comments about the word empowerment is a colonized word, or is a colonizer, a language of the colonizer, right? And how it's almost like this word that maybe some people place as being this like place to arrive at, or some finish line to get to, but that what all three of you are saying is that this is a process, that this is a struggle, that it includes suffering, but it includes success as well. And so let's maybe dive a little bit more into that and kind of go with sharing some of the lessons that you've learned, or some of the experiences that you've had as a professional, but also as a personal individual, or a member of your community, that has allowed you to arrive at understanding empowerment as a process, or what lessons have taught you about what empowerment means, and then how you're maybe teaching that to other people. Because the other thing I noticed that all three of you are saying is that you're bringing up the people behind you, that empowerment is also bringing up your community and your family with you, and that is just as important as being connected to them. And so yeah, let's go with that. The personal lessons and professional lessons and experiences that have evolved for you to understand empowerment. Virginia, hold on, let's unmute you real quick. I see you talking.
There we go. Yeah, I can talk about working with my community, the Gabrielino tribe. Early on, one of the things that I recognize is that, and I was younger, so people were older than me, is that even older people really did not have a lot of connection. They had a connection to their families, but they didn't necessarily have connection to the culture. So my stance on that is, you know, if we're lacking in culture, it's not our fault. It was deliberately taken away from us in layers and layers of ways of trauma. So, you know, where we are today is where we are today. But, you know, does that mean that we can't build it back? No, you know, so I really try to encourage, you know, people to learn as much as they can, and to even, you know, seek out knowledge from some of the older people who may not want to speak because of fear. You know, they don't want to talk about being Indian because, you know, it was such a bad thing back when. So, you know, I think just the encouragement and the, you know, the strength to really to move forward, you know, even though maybe there's not, you know, a great basis, you know, to stand on, you know, and you know, I think what's happened, it's always been, but there's been all of this lateral violence, you know, where one Indian tribe will say, oh, you guys are not really Indian, or you guys don't know nothing about, you know, being Indian, or, you know, there's all of this stuff going on. And, you know, my view at this point is like, you know, why go that way? Let's build up. Let's not tear down. We've been torn down long enough, you know? So, you know, let's keep building up. So I think that was an experience over many years that I encountered, and still to this day, you know, do encounter. But I think it's a little bit more positive as more of us, you know, go forward and try to, you know, indoctrinate people into, you know, just, you know, we can learn, we can continue to learn. We don't have to, you know, there are old ways, but our old ways are our new ways now today, because we are the ones that are here. Mhm.
Yes, very much so. Stephen, you want to go next?
Sure, that sounds good. Most of my, how would you say, successes have been built upon massive failures. Massive failures. Be chasing your tail, trying to fast track, trying to move back, you know, in the 70s and the 80s, and not listening. And that's normal. That's why I understand what's going on now with the youth. And then traveling around to different tribes, traveling in ceremony within California with different tribes, trying to take in, and I was very fortunate enough to be able to take in different ceremonies from San Diego to San Francisco, different styles, Ohlone, Kumeyaay, you know, Hashiman, Tongva, Chumash, you know, everybody. But like I said, it's mainly built on failures. And until you get to a certain point, and then the light bulb goes on. The light bulb goes on is when you really sit and you understand that things take time, they take effort. It's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And the journey is every day. The journey is when you wake up, it's a new day to move forward a little bit more. And you get a new start every single day. I know we forgive, sometimes we don't forget, but we do forgive. But we have to be able to set those aside in all the tribes in Southern California, because our people probably really close. I don't know, Virginia, correct me if I'm wrong, but putting our people together is like herding cats. It's like there's, like she had said, like to quote Virginia, there's the family dynamics. There's just all different ways to go. But I was very, very fortunate. When one window would shut, another would open. And I'd walk through it and I'd gain knowledge. And when that window shut, a door would open. And I found myself with one of the finest elders that actually believed in me, knew my family, knew my father. And when my dad and my mom passed away, slowly years later, kind of took that role as a mentor up and never stopped believing that I could do it, was very patient. And that was Marcus Lopez Sr., Barbara Chumash, my tribal chairman. And I have to give kudos to him, because without him, walking side by side with him, I can never walk in his shoes. I could never fill those shoes in a million years. That's impossible. But to walk side by side with him and learn as much as he wants me to, and that he lets me stray, and then I come back. And then I stray and learn and come back. And that's how mine was all learned, you know, how my process was. And also telling me that you can't do that. Oh, that's the worst thing you can tell me, is you can't do that. Well, you know what? Let me see if I can. That's me. Let me try. Let me see if I can. And I'll be quiet and I'll listen until I can gain enough. And if I don't think it's good, then I won't. And I'll seek the advice of my elders and I'll listen to them. They're the wisdom. That's it, plain and simple. They have 70, 80 years on this earth. You don't get that way being foolish, not being native. And they've been through everything. They've been through everything you can think of. So that's just kind of the way that I know it's not exactly on point, but that's how I was moving forward in my life. Maybe not an empowerment, but propelling myself forward a little bit at a time, That's how I did it. And it's still going. It's not stopping. It's still got a long way to go. So, show home.
Thank you, Stephen. I think that's a good point. Like it's so much, especially in our higher education centers, we are so focused on the acquisition of knowledge that sometimes we forget the difference between knowledge and wisdom, and that we need wisdom, and that oftentimes our elders, or maybe in the more, Western language, mentors, all these kinds of things. These are the people that ideally help to bring you along and teach you from the wisdom that they might have. So it's a good point. Reina, what about you? What lessons or experiences have you had that have helped you evolve on empowerment?
In my experience, it's definitely been being open to the nuances that exist within Indigenous communities. And like Steven said, sometimes you don't want to listen to your elders, but there's a reason why they still speak the native languages and why they still preserve like most of our culture. It wasn't just out of nowhere, they know how to navigate through life. So definitely learning to listen. I'm still learning that. And a lot of nuances. And even as an Indigenous person, as a Zapotec person, because even the term Indigenous is kind of like, but as a Zapotec person, learning even the privileges that I have by being a person from Oaxaca who is residing on native land in California. So when I grew up, I was going to middle school in this bigger town, not my village, but this bigger town called Tlacolula. And a lot of people from my village who are my age went to the same school. So first day of school, every year, we'd all introduce ourselves, say what village or what pueblo we're from, and say our names or whatever. And I noticed that a lot of my, the people that were from my village would say, oh, I'm from Tlacolula and this is my name. But we were obviously not from there. We were from a much smaller village that was like 2 hours away from that town. And I talked to my dad, I'm like, hey dad, like, there's people who are from El Pueblo, and when they introduce themselves, they say they're from Tlacolula. And I mean, I obviously know them and I know their parents are, they're not from there. And I thought I was like doing something here, but I told my dad, I never deny that I'm from the village. And I always say that I'm from Santo Tomas de Arriba. And this is the first time that my dad checked me in that kind of like understanding the nuances of privilege and just like how diverse Indigenous people can be, even from your own community. And he told me, well, you have to understand, yeah, you're from our village, but you speak English and you were born in California. So just because we're from the same village, you have that upper hand of not being embarrassed to be from the village. And that just like really opened my mind. I'm like, wow, he was so right, because I was born in California and I didn't go to Oaxaca until I was 10. So I didn't grow up with that shame of being born in a village. And I didn't grow up with that shame of having an accent when I spoke Spanish. So yeah, that really opened my eyes to the nuances of the many Indigenous communities that are from Oaxaca. And I still continue to learn about the nuances that are here from the California tribes. And yeah, that's where my journey has led me to keep learning and to always have an open mind to the different layers of being Indigenous.
Yeah, thank you very much, Reina. I think I want to shift a little bit now to kind of talking about what kind of institutional and societal changes need to be made or should be made in our communities. Because I think one thing that I'm getting from just listening to the three of you is I appreciate that you're disrupting our language. You're disrupting the use of our language, and we use these words and we don't really take into account how that could potentially be contributing to the issue of erasing culture or forced assimilation or all these other issues that you are speaking about. And so, having said that, I think sometimes that disrupting that paradigm is a change that needs to happen. We need to disrupt. We need to make people a little uncomfortable, right? So what are you thinking needs to happen in society or at our institutions or in our government or our local families that can help achieve more equity or social change when it comes to Native and Indigenous communities? and how we can potentially empower them again, if we want to use that word again. Yeah, go ahead, Virginia.
Well, just what comes to mind right now, and there's a question in the question there, is it's about land acknowledgement. So this is very, very new. I mean, as Native people, we've always had the protocols to acknowledge another tribe's land when we're, traveling or visiting. But this is something that's now come into effect here in California with James Ramos's bill, and it's going to happen throughout the state. So any public venue, people will have to recognize, acknowledge the local people from whatever site they are at. But I think it's a starting point, because just that alone, if you're just say you're in whatever particular site and you acknowledge the people from there, like I said, it's so new, and just say somebody's there and they know, well, this is where I'm from. It's like opening a door to, okay, we recognize who you are, we acknowledge you, we recognize not just you, but your community and your history. And I think that's what's been lacking for such a long time. I mean, even as, in elementary school, I remember opening up the history book on California, and there was one page on Indian people for all California, and it was like, well, wait, where are we? We weren't, we were not anywhere. So, now, we have some, I guess, some place to be able to say, okay, we are here. And it opens it up for, anybody who happens to be, from that particular site. So, that's a starting point. And, right now it's supposed to be, public venues like government places, cities, counties, etc. But, it could be anywhere, it could be, the local skating rink or whatever, just to say, hey, we recognize that there was a history here before the skating rink was here. And, just allowing that much is just, I think, a big, the beginning of a platform for us to be able to say, yes, we are here, we do exist, we never left.
Raina, Stephen, go ahead and jump in whenever you want.
Sure, I'd love to. Thank you, Virginia, for bringing that up. I had a little note for the land acknowledgement. Thank you for covering that. That is, it is nice. It is like you said, is a stepping point for that, and I think that's for a whole nother dialogue, and I think that's great. What can be done is what you asked, correct? In that aspect, and what I had made some notes. Funding and support elementary school, high schools, colleges, educational opportunities to develop California Indian curriculum. That's huge, especially instead of the 4th grade mission system, something a little bit more in depth, which it isn't bad. I mean, I'm sure we can't blast the 4th graders with the reality, because that would freak them out. But having that educational opportunity, we can get funding for that to get in there and work on the curriculum from the base there, and bring that up, especially a little bit in elementary school, junior high school, which are tough years anyway, and into high school, and continue that into college, and just have that. I think that is huge, is that awareness. Yeah, I think without our education, without their education in it, the dominant society, they should learn it. But as Indian people, now to switch gears, without our education, a lot of, I don't know how to say it, without our lack of education, as Indian people, that marginalizes us on the next step. So it is important to get education. Like I said, it's a double-edged sword on all of it, because you have one world and the other world, and we're in this world right now, and that's where we're going to be. This is where you're going to live, have your family, you're going to work, you're going to have children. I mean, you're going to have all in this one. So you have to learn that education is so important to make a difference in your community. That's my view on that.
Thank you, Stephen. Reina, what about you?
Wow, there were so many points touched. I'd like to start with land acknowledgement in Oaxaca. The state of Oaxaca in Mexico is the state with the most indigenous groups who still practice their languages and traditions. We currently don't have a push for land acknowledgement right now. We're kind of just thrown under the umbrella of indigenous and original peoples. So it's a little disappointing when I think about that, because as villages and as people, we're not the same. We could all be, can y'all hear me? Okay.
Yeah,
As okay. As Zapotec people, we're not the same. And it's always so disappointing to always be thrown under indigenous and original peoples, because we even distinguish ourselves by the mountain we're on. We're like, oh, they're the people from that mountain. It'll have a particular name, things like the Fat Mountain or the Bald Mountain, stuff like that. So it's just, I don't know that it'll ever happen, but I think we do deserve to be distinguished in our own ways and not in the ways where it's easier for everyone. As communities, I'm from Santo Tomás de Arriba, and the next village is an hour away, and we don't see ourselves as the same people. Like we do speak the same language and we communicate. We can understand each other, but we don't consider ourselves the same. And we're literally like an hour away. So in terms of land acknowledgement in Oaxaca, where I'm from, it's very tricky because what does that mean if we're so different, even being part of the same indigenous group? You know what I'm saying? So yeah, I feel like with that, we have a long ways to go. And for that same reason, I think a lot of us don't really go through the trouble of explaining these things to people, because it's like, why am I going to spend 30 minutes talking about this if they're going to forget like tomorrow? And I have to live with this, and they can go on the next month, and Indigenous Heritage Month will be over, and they can celebrate us or whatever, but we're the ones who are still stuck with these issues. In terms of how to support Indigenous students on campus, I can speak from being a student that graduated in 2020 from CSUF, is definitely creating a lot more space and programs for the students here. I know when I transferred here, I didn't really feel comfortable or identify myself with the Chicano and Chicano students, because a lot of them are what you would call mestizos. So a lot of their families have already assimilated, only speak Spanish. And unfortunately in Mexico, that's a step, being mestizo is a step up from being indigenous. So when I share my stuff, like, oh yeah, we like chapulines, we eat crickets, we drink tejate, you always get those weird looks. It's like, you know, they like make a stank face or whatever. And it's like, I never really felt comfortable sharing that with like in Chicana spaces or Latinx spaces, because although I have like many overlapping identities, yes, I speak Spanish, yes, I'm from Mexico, but at the same time, I'm Zapotec. So it's like, where is there a space or a bigger community where I can be with other people who are like me, who understand that, for instance, a lot of us, our parents had to migrate here from Oaxaca or Mexico. And when you're indigenous, you don't only have to learn English, you also have to learn Spanish. So it's, you know, our parents went from using leña, from using wood fire to make an egg, to coming here, and it's like they're using escalators, they're using elevators, something that they've never used before. That for us, it's like second nature. You step onto an escalator and you're good. And for a lot of elders, unfortunately, it's tricky to get on those things because they're not exposed to them. So I will always be grateful for Intertribal Student Council here on campus. They truly gave me a safe space where I met a lot of Indigenous students who shared their traditions with me. And I was able to comfortably share my experiences without feeling like I was going to get made fun of.
Yeah, thank you very much. I hear what you all are saying is one part of this is like making sure that we probably revisit and really push back on the systems that design the political choice of what history gets taught to our young people and how we disrupt that. I keep thinking of my own, I was an 80s kid too, and I grew up with, like, we built missions, and we were like taught that, like, all of a sudden California history started with missions, and like didn't really get told by a teacher or a school that there was a lot more history that happened before the missions, right? And how that lack of critical thinking didn't happen in my own education until later. And so I think you're right. Like, it's important that we start to work with our communities to introduce that kind of critical consciousness that you're talking about developing with people. So, having said that, what do you think there, or rather, sorry, what advice would you give to people who are saying they want to be an ally, or they want to be supportive, or they want to be in solidarity, or they want to empower you or validate your own ideas and your own thinking and your own needs as a member of the community? What advice do you give to people who are not Indigenous or non-Native people who are wanting to contribute to the process of empowering or lifting up and validating your membership in the larger community, in this world that we exist in, like Stephen said? What advice would you give to people?
I have, if I may jump ahead, I had sent earlier we call a white paper in the spirit of a red paper. And I had sent that by email to you, to whoever would like it out there.
And Stephen, just to let you know, we just posted that in the chat for everybody.
Okay. Just what you said. How does one become an ally to Indigenous people? That's the first head right there on it. And that should say everything right there. This whole document that was written up by 7th Gen, it talks about how does one become a good ally, the problems with allies, some basics, that I would suggest everybody just take a quick look at that, and that would, I think that would cover everything from what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Reina or Virginia, what would you add?
I can go ahead. In those terms, in academia especially, I would say learn how to, for allies, I would say learn how to question everything you learn in academia that isn't from an Indigenous person. We lied to a lot of people to keep our traditions intact sometimes. I know I've done it, or I don't like to share it. Don't invalidate our experiences. When it comes to the experiences of my grandmother, whose first language was Zapoteco, who grew up in our village, her word has a lot more weight than any academic paper from any person with a PhD. Like, I don't care about those titles when it comes to lived experiences. And it definitely makes me happy that now we have people in these fields who are Indigenous, who are writing these papers in a very knowledgeable and respectful way, and instead of just for show, just for credentials. So learn how to question all of the academic papers that aren't from Indigenous people, and always listen to Indigenous people, even if it might make you feel uncomfortable, because again, as people of color who aren't Indigenous, we can also be the oppressors. there are many nuances to this. So learn how to listen to Indigenous people, even if it might make you feel uncomfortable. Also, don't jump on trends as an ally. I understand right now there's a push to figure out who you are. A lot of people are taking DNA tests, but also be mindful that those might not be accurate. And a lot of us, I have family members who have been adopted by tribes, by like my Indigenous group, who migrated from another Indigenous group, and because they married within our community, they became Zapotec. So not all of it is by blood. So just be careful with all that, and just make sure you amplify Indigenous voices.
For myself, I think one of the biggest aha moments for me was when I realized that the bigger society doesn't think like me. And it took me a long time to process this and come to the view that my worldview is different from the larger society. So I think if the larger society can step back and say, oh, this person or these people, they think about everything around them differently than I do. Just that one moment of acceptance of that, I think can go a long, long way, because it just leaves space for more dialogue, more connection, more awareness, more education. I had this experience very early on, and I was being driven home from the car lot where they were fixing my car. So they were driving me home to wait for my car. And the driver, who was white, he said, "Oh, you're Native?" And I says, "Yeah, I am." And then I forget what his question was, but I remember saying something to him about the land. And he says, well, how do I think different about the land? And I kind of had to explain to him, well, you use the land like as something to just live on or for profit. And for us, it's, it's a lot different. Like, when I look at a plant, it's different, for me than it is for you. You don't think in terms of medicine or so forth. And so when we had that conversation and he initiated the conversation, it started to sink into me that I thought different. Now at this point, I'm like, no, everybody else thinks different. So, so it's just like, let me be with how I am and what my concepts are. Let me share them with you if you want to, know about them. But just have that openness to be able to understand that, in our larger society, I think for a long time, my understandings and teachings as a student was this is the way it is. And I think that, now we have more ability to be a little bit more open for a lot more. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. I guess we're getting, it's about 12:40 now. So we're getting a few questions from the group that I think we can dive into here for a few minutes. One of them I think that I want to go to first is a question that's related to a little bit of our political climate right now. There's a lot of debate or presentation at our school boards and wanting to ban ethnic studies or curriculum that might be more critical in nature, like critical race theory and these other kinds of things in the school system. I'm wondering what role or what do you all see in these political climates, this kind of like wanting to be colorblind or erase the ethnic perspective from things? How would Indigenous people interpret that, or what would they say, or how would the three of you respond to these kinds of political questions that are facing society now, and that people are seeing in the news and in their communities, on their school boards, and from their local leaders?
It goes back to what I read at the beginning, that these controls are intended to keep Indigenous people divided, dependent, and oppressed. That's what it goes back to on it. It's just squash it back down again. We don't want to have ethnic studies. You have to really fight for ethnic studies and critical race theory. And in the younger ages, you're more apt to get those in colleges than you are in high schools. You won't find them. I don't know if they're in like in Fullerton College or Saddleback or any of those around here. But it's a constant battle, and we have to find a way to get in. We just have to keep. It's one of those things you just got to keep at it. Like they say, the smallest water drop can wear away the biggest boulder. We just have to keep on it slowly and just keep on it and keep on it and keep on it, because it's very, very important, because it enlightens everybody. And when it comes down to it, we're still all in this together. We're all in the same life together. We only have one planet. We live on this blue marble that floats around. This is what we have. This is our habitat, and it's very delicate. And like you said, when you said political climate or temperature, it made me think of what's happening yesterday and today. I'm not going to get political here, but what I see going on, of course, we see a mess going on. We see red and blue, and it's fighting, and it's trying to see who's going to control this and everything. And I see what both sides are trying to do, and it has nothing to do with our seventh generation. It has nothing to do with what are we leaving our grandchildren. What is the world going to be like for my grandchildren right now? I have 5. What is it going to be like for them? Virginia, what is it going to be like for your children, grandchildren, in 20 years, 30 years, 50 years? In the 7th generation, we have no idea. So that's why we're trying to get the education in now for everybody. So at least we can get something going. It just bite off a little bit of time. It's in baby steps, but it's an uphill battle, definitely.
I think what one of the things we're talking about here is voice. When I attended Cal State Fullerton, they were just barely initiating ethnic studies as something to study. My children, when they went to college, my daughter was surprised that in her ethnic studies class, the white woman, and it was required at that time, asked the instructor, "Why do we have to take ethnic studies?" So I think there's an understanding that needs to be learned by the larger society, that, like Stephen says, we're all here together, whether we like it or not. So why not try to understand or have some understanding? I look at it, if they want to do away with these kinds of classes that just really promote more understanding, if they want to do away with them, I can only view it as oppression. More oppression. And we see what that's done to our peoples, all of our peoples. And so we know that, in some ways it's been profitable. We are a great nation because of oppression, so now what do we do with that? Do we keep oppressing, or do we learn to move in a better way? We should be able to do that. We've had many, many lessons along the way. We should have been able to do this quite some time ago, but we need to keep moving forward. And one of the ways to do that is to promote understanding of each other through these kinds of teachings of ethnic studies. Myself personally, I really enjoy learning about other people's, because, I don't know everything about everybody. I don't know, about other cultures as much as I would like to. But when I learn, I'm really impressed. I think, wow, that gives me a whole different view of who those people are. So, I think we can just move forward in a better way, being inclusive of those kinds of teachings.
I was just thinking, Virginia, with everything that you were saying, listening to what Raina had to bring to the table. We can be oppressors also. And we are our own worst enemies as Indigenous people too. And so,
Agreed.
yes, and that gets into it because of greed. And that is the dominant society's way. And that's where it comes, where it's when I talk about being the two paths and they cross, sometimes they start going the other direction. And we see that all the time. You see it all the time. I see it all the time. And in times, for certain reasons, I've even been an offender of it and caught it. And so then it's like, that's a big lesson right there. When you can catch yourself and you're like, okay, I'm never going to do that again, and keep my head straight. Like I said, it's been by failures, not always successes. So yes, I think, quoting Raina, I think we can be our own worst enemy, and we can be oppressors also. So we have to be careful. Oh.
Yeah, definitely.
When it comes to the whole ethnic studies, it's honestly disappointing, and I don't even know like how to say this anymore with words. When I was here at Cal State Fullerton, it was disappointing that there wasn't a space where I could go ask for guidance. We literally had a club with like 3 people. That was my safe space. I could count with my fingers who supported me. Deborah Redsteer from anthropology. She was one of my mentors, and I do consider her one of my elders. She's taught me so much. Rosalina Camacho also, and now it makes me really happy that we have Jorge with student affairs doing all these cool events for the Native population. But yeah, it's just very disappointing. And like I thought to myself before this Zoom meeting, it's like, what's going to be the point of it? What's going to happen after this? Probably nothing. But I'm glad that I got to meet people like Steven and like Virginia. You know, I'm going to take what they taught me with me forever. And yeah, it's disappointing how, like Virginia said, it should have happened a long time ago. There's so much money in this school, and we still only have a club that's ran by students who aren't being paid. It's like, what's going on there? Deborah was able to get me a stipend one semester, and that helped me so much because we would organize events with like 3 other students for the whole university, mind you. We would plan the president's reception, and we weren't getting paid most of the time, only until our last semester. So it's disappointing. We're being neglected. I truthfully don't care this campus cares about the Indigenous community, because otherwise we would have a lot more proof to see it, and we wouldn't just have celebrations. We'd have help. We would have more students coming in here from boarding schools, but we don't. So even this kind of just feels like, it just feels like a big show. Like, yeah, we're having a cool conversation, but now what? Leaving aside that depressing part of the conversation, I'd like to touch what Stephen had to say about us being our biggest oppressors. Unfortunately, in Oaxaca, there are a lot of Indigenous groups, and the further you are from the city of Oaxaca, the more Indigenous you are. So I'm from the valleys, I'm Zapotec, we speak Zapoteco, but a lot of the people from my community think they're better than the Mije community because they live further in the mountains. They spread so much hate against them and so many false narratives about them because they're from an even more remote area than we are from. And it's just unfortunate to see, because when the Oaxacan community migrates here, that doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, it's unfortunate that even as Indigenous people, we are oppressors. The closer, the less of an accent you have in Spanish, the more above everybody else you'll be. Thank you.
Thank you, Raina. Oh, go ahead, Stephen.
Thank you, Raina, for that. That is, I've heard that many, many times. And like you said, what is going to happen when we're done with this? Was this just a great conversation? Of course, I love seeing Virginia anytime. It's been many, many years. Thank you for letting me see you, Raina. It was a pleasure to be sitting here with you. I'm honored to be here with your words. I am your student. When we're done with this, it doesn't have to stop here. How can I help? I know Virginia would probably say the same. How can we help at Cal State Fullerton? How can we help even in any way to help that move forward for the other? And I don't like the word Indigenous. It's okay, but you know, I'm Chumash. I'm not Indigenous. I'm Chumash. I'm from the coast of Santa Barbara, and I'm from the island of Santa Cruz, right off the coast. So but it is our word we use, Indigenous, Native. I'm still good with Indian, but you know, that's a different generation. But how can we help? How can we help Cal State Fullerton? Oh.
Yes, thank you. You know, Raina, I just want to say too, you know, I'm new to campus. I only been here a week and a half, and when I went to school here, it was 2000 to 2005, and you know, I also did my dissertation here with a group of Chicano studies students back in 2010 and 11. But I just want to say that, like, I think that as someone new and somebody who's working here now, I think that it is important to hear what you have to say, to understand how that can fit into someone like me who's working here and all the other people. I mean, we have almost 50 people in this room right now who I would encourage to be asking themselves, what are we doing to advance student groups, to advance the mission of the university, and to create a more inclusive and equitable community at our university? All of you, I think, hit on it, that empowerment is a struggle, it's a journey, and that we're, as a campus, we're kind of on that journey right now. And it's important that we have space and hold space to understand what those perspectives are, especially for people like me who might not be out at Titan Walk like every day, or might not understand it from a student's perspective all the time. And so there is value in hearing that. And so what I want to ask is, just to kind of close, is I want to build off of what Stephen said after Raina, which is, so what? So now we've had this conversation. What do people need to do? What should these 50 people in this room take away as maybe an action that they can think about taking, instead of just being a listener and observer? Maybe there's some sort of action or recommendation that you might have, or words of encouragement to people at Cal State Fullerton to continue the disruption of our thinking and complicating this issue even more as people who want to engage in it intellectually, but also as people who want to maybe take action and achieve some sort of change in their own sphere of influence. What would you say to people as kind of closing words?
In closing words, and in my language, Shumawish, Tipa Shumawish, be kind to one another. Again, we're on this journey. We see, and when I say we, that's all of us, students, myself, everybody, Virginia, Raina. We see what's going on. We see the direction it needs to go. People want to help. They want to be a part of the healing, not a part of the problem. And I would love, be kind to one another, ask questions. Quoting Raina, ask an Indigenous person, ask somebody that's native from the land, or from a tribe from here, how they can help in any way, or just get into the right mindset. That's a baby step forward. That's just a thought in my head. And for us, it's kind of hard to cross over in the language when you try to translate free English out. But when I said Shumawish, Tipa Shumawish it is close to health and tranquility, but it's more than that. We need to gain peace within ourselves. We need to, with this whole thing, we need to be comfortable living in our own skin, which is hard enough in the first place. So I just, in my closing words, just ask questions politely, and be careful what you ask for, because you'll get an answer. he'll definitely get an answer from somebody. You may want to hear, you may not want to hear, but it's going to be from the heart and from the truth. And there's nothing wrong as long as it's the truth, and from an Indigenous person, there's that word again. But I would be glad at any time if any of the students, if Cal State would have me down at their convenience, I'd be glad. I'm sure they might be able to do it, where I would love to come down and meet and talk if there's any other further questions. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. How about you, Virginia?
I would just say that along the path, it's been a lot of twists and turns and jumping forward and falling backwards, and but I think the main thing is to be able to keep moving forward, and however that plays out in your own self. For me, am I going to do a workshop next week where I'm going to share some of our cultural values with Native people or with non-Native people? I don't know, but keep moving forward, and I would say on an individual basis, people need to start talking with each other, and like Stephen said, ask those questions. Don't be afraid to ask a question. I mean, don't be invasive, but at the same time, there's a respectful way to find out, and find an answer to whatever question you might have. And sometimes just even sitting there in the silence is going to answer your questions. But I think there's a lot of work to be done in terms of moving forward, the understanding of who we are as a people, whatever tribe we're from. There's still a lot of work to be done. So I just think that we need to keep that in mind. And, you never know when the opportunity is going to come forward for you to be able to speak or help or say or do or support whatever it happens to be. So, yeah, I would just say to keep moving forward.
Thank you, Virginia. Reina.
I think Stephen wanted to say something real quick. Oh, okay. I'd say as somebody who graduated from Cal State Fullerton not that long ago, with the reality that we have right now, you can simply show up to the events that are coming up this month. I think on Monday, we're going to have some performers and food vendors for Native American Heritage Month. And as faculty and staff, you can introduce yourself to people from Intertribal Student Council. I'm almost certain they're going to be tabling, and don't just leave them their card and be like, hey, I'm here for you whenever you need me. Email them, follow up with them, even if you haven't heard from them once or twice. As students, you're so busy sometimes, and sometimes you're shy to reach out to faculty and staff. So, be persistent. Don't think that just because you handed out your card, you've done enough. No, you have to consistently show up to the general meetings, even if you're surrounded by students. And like Virginia said, sit in silence, just hear what they have to say, show up to the meetings, show up to the events. You can work with Jorge Contreras. He's, I'm not sure exactly how, but whatever you do, maybe you can reach out to him and organize something. But yeah, that's how I feel like we can support as of now.
Thank you. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Virginia. Thank you, Reina. We're going to wrap up now. I think one of the biggest takeaways I think for today is just to really, what you've taught us is that empowerment's a journey, that it looks different for everybody. I really appreciate what Reina and Stephen and Virginia did today, which was to challenge us on the language and understanding this kind of the colonizers of need to categorize all people as one Indigenous group, and when in fact it's not a monolith. It's a very diverse, it's a very complicated group of people, and there's lots within that identity group, and that we should always try to keep that in mind when we're moving forward and thinking about the concept of empowerment and Indigenous people, that it's not so easy as those 2 words or those 3 words, that it's a lot more complicated than that. So Thank you all for joining us. I know it's 1 o'clock, so we're going to wrap up now. Thank you for joining us for the Native Empowerment in Native and Indigenous Communities Titan Table Talk today. I want to especially thank our co-collaborators, the Alumni Engagement Office, our Government External Relations Office, and of course, President Virgie and the President's Office today. Our next Titan Table Talk will be on February 22nd from 11:30 to 1 p.m. It will be on empowerment in the Black community. And thanks again for being part of our conversation. We hope you will join us next time. Have a great afternoon, everybody, and be well.
I wish Kamala.
Bye-bye.